everybody. Welcome again to Literary Tuesdays. I'm your host, Marilyn Alexander, publisher and founder of Destined to Publish. Destined to Publish is a independent, Christian-based hybrid publishing company with a focus on literary coaching. With over 20 years in the publishing industry, we've helped more than 350 authors, both nationally and abroad, to successfully publish their manuscripts. We take each and every one of our authors by the hand and walk them step by step along their publishing journey. Because we believe more than anything else, just because you're self-publishing does not mean you have to publish by yourself. And today, I am so grateful to have had an opportunity to interview one of my favorite authors. Her name is Queen Brailey, and her story is The Legacy of a Sharecropper's Daughter. And her story may resonate with a lot of you. So let's welcome her in. Hi, Miss Queen.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you today?
I'm great.
I am so excited to be talking with you, and I am so excited for our listeners to hear about your book. But first, can you tell us a little bit of something about Queen Brailey?
Of course I can, but first I have to give honor to God, who is responsible for all this happening.
Absolutely.
Yes, I'm Queen Brailey. I was born and raised in a small town in Greenville County, little town called Fountain Inn. But they used to have a sign there that said the best little town in South Carolina. I was raised with my mother and father, who was two loving parents and who are deceased now. But they had 13 children.
Wow.
They had 6 girls and 7 boys. And guess what? I'm the 6th girl. I'm sandwiched between the girls and the boys.
Yes.
Everybody thought my mom and dad was trying to have a boy. But when the first boy came, they just kept on having children. And they were very blessed. I attended Fountain Inn Elementary School. And that building was one of the Oswald schools. You remember that?
Yes, I've heard of that.
Okay, I attended school. The gymnasium that we had there was one of those schools, and it was built by Pegleg Gates. He was responsible for having it built. And he and my father were great friends. And he visited our house. Of course, I was a bitty little girl then. So anyway, I finished Fountain Inn Elementary School, and I attended Bryson High School, and I played basketball. I was president of the student body, and I even got put out of school.
What?
Can you believe it?
No.
Oh, I did something bad, and the principal put me out of school. But anyway, we solved that. we got over that. And I graduated from high school as valedictorian. Wow. And I was ready to go to college, and found out that there was no money for me to go to school. And finally, my sister in California told me that my dad went over town, the little town of Fountain Inn, and he had a friend named, they called him Cousin Buddy. And he sat down with Cousin Buddy, and they thought he was homeless. And he told Cousin Buddy that he had this youngest daughter, wanted to go to school, and he didn't have the money to send her. So Cousin Buddy stood up and said, "How much money you need, Henry?" He said, $300. He reached in his third pair of pants and gave my daddy $300.
Wow.
I got to college.
Wow.
So I have 2 daughters, Nicole and Crystal.
Mm-hmm.
I have 7 grandchildren and 3, oh my God, beautiful great grandchildren. They are the joy of my life. Serenity, Kalia, and Shia.
Wow.
So that's enough about me right now. That's it.
Well, I know that the reason why I'm so excited for you to share about the legacy of a sharecropper's daughter, I'm sure as our readers can, even our listeners can actually hear, you are a phenomenal storyteller. And I was just excited to hear your stories and to just listen as you were, as we kind of went back and forth. And when we finished this book, just to hear some of the stories that you were able to share was phenomenal. So can you tell us what was your inspiration behind actually just sitting down to write? Why? What was the purpose? What's your inspiration?
I'm going to just back up a minute. Um, I forgot to tell you that I was born in 1939 and I'm 82 years old. Just
82 years
truly
young.
82 years young. Truly, truly, truly blessed.
Yes.
The inspiration for writing the book, I think, came about. My daughter Nicole invited me to do a workshop. Um, she was with Head Start, and to do a workshop with some of her Head Start teachers. I'm in early childhood. So at that time, the teachers were complaining about how hard it was and all the things that they had to do. And I said, well, now is a good time to share some of my experiences and let them know what I had to go through
Yes.
to get to where I am. I said,
Yes.
I had to get my assignments out by kerosene lamp. I had to walk 3 miles to school. And sometimes when it rained, my daddy would have umbrellas or old ragged raincoat to put over us so that we could get to school. So I said, you don't have anything to complain about.
Yes.
You need to just get in there and work with the children and let them know that they're special. My mom and dad, we never realized we were poor because we didn't know what rich was. So
Mm.
we were rich in love. And I think that's the main thing that really matters now and today. So after that, I came home. I found out that I had cancer. And my daughter said to me, well, Ma, why don't you just start writing something? Why don't you just put it in writing?
Yes.
And we didn't know that you had gone through, the things that you went through. Why don't you just write it down? And that's kind of like how I got into writing the story.
Now,
Story.
as you're sharing that, I am reminded that some of our listeners or watchers may not know what a sharecropper is. Can you explain that term to us? And especially when it comes to your title, the legacy of a sharecropper's daughter, because it could be, to some people that might seem like an oxymoron, that you have a legacy, but then there's a sharecropper's daughter. So can you explain that to us?
Yes, I can. Um, my father was given away at birth, and he was given to a family who were sharecroppers. So he became a sharecropper, and that's how I became a sharecropper. And I remember one day I was in the yard, and this white man came, and he was talking to my father. And I didn't like the way he was talking to my father. And when he left, I asked my dad, I said, why is he talking to you like that? He doesn't have that right. And my dad said, yes, he does, short stuff. That was my nickname. He said he owns the land, he owns the house, and he owns most of the livestock. And that's when I found out that we were sharecroppers. But to back up a little bit, um, at the end of slavery, when slavery ended, sharecropping began. The slaves had nowhere to go. They had no money. They had no property. They had a little bit of nothing. So this new wave of agriculture came into being. The slave owners had all this land and they didn't have anybody to work it. So what they did, they rented it out. And the sharecroppers, in other words, the people or the families who lived on their land and farmed their land, at the end of the crop seasons, they had to give them half of whatever it was that they made.
Wow.
And what my mom and dad did, because they really didn't have the money, they had to borrow money on a monthly basis for us to live off of. So at the end of the crop season, they had to pay back what they had borrowed, plus give them half of the money. There were times when my mom and dad would go to what we call settling up at the big house. And if they came back with a roll of bologna meat and a loaf of bread,
Yes.
mayonnaise, and some vanilla wafers, we knew they had paid their debt.
Yes.
Able to come back, and we celebrated. And oh yeah, we always had the Pepsi Colas. But if it was a bad year, sometimes the little thing called boll weevils would get into the crops and eat the crops up. And if that happened, they would go and would come back and they would not have made anything. So sharecropping was a way of ex-slaves taking care of their families. And it was a term called debt bondage. And that was when you really didn't have enough money to pay off your bills. And it was added on to the next year.
Wow.
And you never really got out of it. It almost kind of led you into poverty.
Wow.
But
Wow.
it was a new way of agriculture, of people making a living after slavery had ended.
So as you grew up and came out of that, how did you, what was your transitional period from the sharecropping era or the sharecropping years into something that transitioned you into a better life? How was that transitioning period for you?
Well, I think the idea that I had when I left home to go to college was never to return to the cotton fields. So it was the idea that I had to get an education because education was the way out of it.
Yes.
I had two sisters before me who had broken that sharecropping and they had gone to college. So it was my turn. So I finally got into college and it was kind of rough when I got to college.
Okay.
At the end of my freshman semester, first semester, my daddy called and said that I had to come home because he didn't have the money to pay for me to go to school. And I said, I'm not coming home. I'm not going back in the fields. So I had an advisor at South Carolina State that I really didn't like that well. But I went to her and I told her what was happening. She sent me to this lady called Miss Sheffield. And I explained to her what was going on, that I had to go home because my dad didn't have any money and I needed a job. She looked at me and she said, honey, I got enough lazy students working in my dining hall. I don't need anybody else. So I got up with tears meeting under my chin and I walked out and I slammed the door as hard as I could. I said, you don't have to give me a job, but I'm going to get an education.
Yes.
So I got halfway down the hall and she said, come back here, girl. Plus, she was my chemistry teacher. She gave me a job. And I was able to get the business manager to defer my tuition and I got into college. I mean, I was able to
Continue.
next semester.
Yes.
After that, the lady that was over the dining hall that hired me to work, I started working at her house. I did all her sewing.
Wow.
And I did catering for her. And I would leave the dining hall about 5:30 or 6 o'clock, go to her house and work. And I would come back to the dorm about 8 or 9 o'clock. I'd take a shower and go to bed, go to sleep. I'd wake up about 4 o'clock, go down to the end of the hall and get my lesson out for the next day.
Wow.
And that's kind of like how I made it. So in the book, I often refer to as you can make it.
You can make it.
Regardless of what the obstacles are, you can make it. You have a focus. And I always say, God has a plan for you.
Yes.
And all you have to do is follow that plan, and he will see you through it.
I guess that leads us into what I really, really wanted to kind of get into more is that just that word legacy. And even as you're talking about the stories and being able to share these stories with not just your children, but your children's children, um, how has writing this book affected your family? What has been the response from those around you about your writing the book? How has that kind of how has writing this about your legacy and what you've come through, how has that affected where you are right now?
Well, I think the main thing that happened in the book when the book was published and when it came out, um, the family found out that it was 130 plus offsprings of Henry and Lucia Berry living. And that was really exciting,
Yes.
very exciting. And, to think that I got grandchildren, grandnieces, great grandnieces and nephews, great great grandnieces and nephews. So, in writing that book, I wanted them to know that, you know, where we came from. It doesn't tell the whole story about the family, but it gives a good background on how we was raised and what we had to go through to get to where we were. So that was not just for me, the entire family, the girls and the boys had to go through these things in order to make a living.
Right.
So I wanted them to know that Henry and Lucia Berry were great people. They created great children, and we are creating great children. I can truly say that we haven't had maybe one person that got into drugs out of all 130 something. I don't think we've had any alcoholics. We haven't had any lot of gun violence,
Um,
those kinds of things. I want them to know their family. And when the bad pandemic came, it stopped me from every year, the Saturday before Mother's Day, I would always have a cookout for the family.
mhm.
And the last time I had it, I think it was 87 in attendance. That was
Oh,
a lot of people.
yes.
And believe it or not, my father's was a white man.
Mhm.
And at that gathering, one of my nieces had done a search, a DNA search, legacy of a family background search.
Mhm.
She found this lady who was a second cousin of my father.
Wow.
She came.
Wow.
She came, and we still communicate. She's a good friend of mine. She, in fact, I guess the first 10 pages of the book, the pictures in the book,
Yes.
she researched those pictures and she got those pictures together for us. And I want them to know that, you know, our background is weird. It's kind of weird, you know. When my first child was born, when I got pregnant, my husband and I got together and we said, well, we don't know what she's going to look like. My granddad is white on my daddy's side. My granddad on my mama's side was from the Indian background.
Mhm.
So, they need to know these things and to know that just because somebody look one way, it doesn't mean that it's something else, that it
Yes.
goes way back. So
Yes.
I wanted the family to realize and to know who they are,
Mhm.
their cousins, and so when you get out there, you don't end up dating your cousins or your
Yes.
or
Yes.
your family members. Because I mean, they're everywhere in Michigan, California, Florida, Georgia. We are all over the United States.
Yes.
So they need to know and know where they come from and who they are. So we all have a legacy.
Mhm.
We all have a story to tell.
Yes.
And I have gotten calls from people who have said, You have written my story.
Wow.
That was my story. And one lady stayed on the phone for an hour. She talked through the whole book. She said, we weren't sharecroppers, but we had outdoor toilets. We had to go out and draw our water from the well. So it's a story that has hit a lot of people. And one lady said that her mother wanted her to write about her life. She was a sharecropper
Mhm.
and she took sick. She passed away before she could write it. And
Wow.
she told me, she said, thank you for writing the story. Um, I know this was something you said you wanted to ask me. What was uh, part of it that may have hurt me?
Yes.
Okay. In writing the story, um, I thought about the time when I went home from college on a Christmas break. I got on the bus, and when I got on the bus, it was a sign that said Negroes in the back. And that Negro has gone from Negro to various names, and now we are considered blacks. But anyway, I sat on the front row, and as the people got on, the bus filled up. And it was a white man that came and looked me in the eye and said, all the seats were taken. And he said, nigger, get up, give me that seat. And I thought what my mama had said to me. She said, Queen, keep your mouth closed so you don't get in trouble. So I got up and I had to stand up on the bus from Orangeburg to Columbia.
Wow.
When I got to Columbia, I got off the bus and I wanted some water. And when I looked, it said white only. So I got on the bus, came on home. And my brothers and I, we would always pick what we call scrap cotton. That was the cotton that was left in the field after they had finished up everything.
Mhm.
And we would get that cotton and we'd get a little bit of money for the Christmas holidays. So Daddy took us and he said, okay, let's take it to the big house and we'll weigh it up and y'all can get your money. So we went to the big house and my daddy said, go tell the people we're here, Queen. He said, short stuff, my nickname. So I went to the front door. So the lady came to the front door and she said, what do you want? I said, my daddy. And before I finished it, she said, go to the back door. And she slammed the door in my face. So I went around the house and I was crying. And Daddy said, come here, short stuff. What's wrong? I said, she slammed the door in my face. He said, where did you go? I said, I went to the front door. He said, why did you do that? You know you're not supposed to go to the front door. You're supposed to go to the back door. I said, I don't know why I can't go to the front door. He said, because I have to borrow money from these people to send me to school.
Mhm.
And that broke my heart.
Yeah.
It was at that point that I wanted to stop. I said, my mom and daddy has struggled. They've been spit on. They've been stepped on. They've been slapped in the face. All of these things they had done in order to bring the children to where they wanted them to be.
Yeah.
But my two sisters convinced me to continue writing. So I did. And I guess I've gotten off the point now. So that was the most hurtful thing that happened as I was writing the book.
Well, I don't think you got off the point. I think that is the point. I think the point is that there are legacies living among us, and these stories that that you're telling that you have lived. So we're third generations out, or I would be a third generation out. So I would be telling your story. So to hear the stories from you, actually knowing that this is a living legacy who's lived through all of these different errors that we can only read about and that now they're trying to stop us from reading about is so important.
And now it appears that we are almost going back to where we were before.
Yes, ma'am.
So I think it's important that they know that these
Yes.
things have happened. And if we're not careful, if we don't stand up, and if we don't express ourselves and make it known that we're not going back to where we move forward, we're going to keep moving. Fired from my first job because I was fired from my first job because I felt like the children needed certain things. And the principal told me there was no money. I said, but you go to the State Department of Education and you can get money to get things with.
Yes.
And he would not do it. And I went over his head to the superintendent, and the superintendent said, write up a purchase order. I did it. And when he knew anything, trucks was coming in there with sewing machines, washing machines, stoves, refrigerators.
Yes, yes.
So when I looked up, I went home for a few days. When I came back, and on my desk, there was a letter saying that as of May 31st, your service will no longer be needed.
Wow.
And I said, when God closed one door,
he'll open up another and
he'll
another
open up another
and another.
And that was the best thing that ever happened to me because I kept moving.
So, Miss Queen, can you speak to those out there who are in their what they might think would be their senior years or their golden years? Can you speak to them because they may think it's too late for them to tell their story? What would you say to someone who is hearing your story now and can relate to every single thing that you've said? What would you say to them?
I would say write your story, whether it's published or not. Write your story. Sit down and talk with your family. Let them know who they are, where they came from, where their background, what their background is. And my niece did this search, and we actually found out a lot about my father. But now I'm interested in my mother's side of the family. Okay. I don't know that much about my mother's side of the family. I know a good bit about my father's side of the family because my father told us when we were growing up that our grandfather was white. He didn't keep it from us. Okay. He told us that he was white. And when he was dying, he sent for my father. He wanted to give him a share of the property. But Daddy said, no, I'm not going. That white man raped my mama. But we weren't sure whether it was that because this man never married. He never had any children. His mother had one daughter after that. But we, the members of the family, felt like they really was in love. Wow. They were in love. A black woman and a white man.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Could not have happened.
So they took that baby when it was born and got it out of there right quick. But my daddy, I always said to him, Daddy, maybe we would not be, we may not have been sharecroppers for so long if you had gone and got what you deserved.
Right.
That was yours.
Yes.
You needed it. He said, well, at the time, I didn't feel like I wanted it. So we didn't lose respect for him. We still respect him as our dad. But we just felt like he could have. It could have been different. And then who knows? If it had been different, we don't know what it would have been like. You know?
Exactly.
So as I said, God create your past, just follow it.
That's it. Like I told you, I knew that this 30 minutes was going to go by so fast. Are there any last points or anything that you would like to share that we haven't asked or that you would like to just share?
Yes, I would like to say a couple of things about the book.
Okay.
The cover of the book is designed by Dr. Leo Twiggs, who retired from South Carolina State. He's a well-known artist, and this can be a collector's item.
Yes.
If you look at the book real closely, in the lower left corner, he has signed the book.
His signature.
He has put his pen to it. And when I talked with him about it, I mentioned some things I wanted on the cover, and that was like a group of people coming out of a cotton field or something like that. He said, no, honey, you need the big house and the White House if you're going to do sharecropping.
Yes.
This is what he did. And if you look at the lady on the book, she's wearing pink and green.
Yes.
I don't know if that tells you something or not, but anyway.
Yes, ma'am.
And I said to him, I said, you put that lady in pink and green? He said, I noticed you every now and then. Okay, and the foreword in the book is written by none other than James Clyburn.
Yes.
our representative in the House of Representatives, who is my classmate, the class of 61. And it was a hard time trying to get him to do it because he was so busy in DC. And finally, when we decided that we were going to go ahead with the book, an email came in and he had answered the call.
And we got it in there.
We got it in there. And in the back of the book, Miss Marilyn did a beautiful job on outlining the family tree.
Yes.
Where she showed all of the family members. And I'm just so happy. I'm real happy about the book. It has gone over well. And right now we're getting ready to advertise it in the National South Carolina State University alumni. And I have that little pen up here, South Carolina State.
Yes.
I believe in HBCUs.
Yes.
We got to support them. We got to keep them going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I just want to say thank you to Destiny for publishing. You did an awesome job. You're a great lady.
Thank you.
God blessed. You can always tell. All you have to do is talk to you. You don't have to hear God's name. You know it's there.
Yes, ma'am.
I love you and keep up the good works.
Well, it has been such a pleasure. I tell you, this is one of my treasures and one of my favorite books to read. And I am so blessed to have known you and to have gotten to be able to be a part of your journey in publishing. And so I just want to encourage those who are listening today. I know that there are similar stories like Miss Queen's. And like she said, whether it's published or not, it needs to be told. It needs to be written. And so now is the time, if you know of a relative, grab a tape recorder and record their stories for them so that your children and your children's children can understand that they've come from a rich, powerful legacy of men and women who have stood in places that we don't have to stand because they were able to be there. Absolutely. And so, Ms. Queen, I thank you so much for just taking a little time out of your day to day to be with us. And I am so grateful. And for those of you who are ready to publish your books, you can visit me at destinedtopublish.com. My name is Marilyn Alexander. And thank you again for being watching us and being in tune with us today on Literary Tuesdays.
And you won't regret it because Marilyn is a beautiful person.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.